Sometimes when you try to accuse a country or a people of doing something, sometimes that something doesn't really work because of this little thing called a definition. So something you could do is just change the definition and you can accuse anybody of anything. This is not the first time we've seen that. Specifically, we are talking about changing when it comes to the definition of starvation to apply to the situation in Gaza. We've seen it before when Ireland and I think also the Amnesty International have asked the International Court of Justice to shift a little bit the definition of genocide so it can fit into criteria for Israel. So this is one of the main topics we'll be talking about today. We'll also talk a little bit about what Francesca Albanese has been up to recently. She's kind of criticizing the UN, so that should be interesting, as well as uh, which country is it? Qatar is going to name a hospital after a terrorist. So we might also talk about that. Joining me today, welcome to the reality show. Joining me today are Stuart Margolis and Ia Reichel. Thank you guys for joining me today. And I'll jump to you first, Iyar. I'm not sure if you were appearing on shows when the change of definition of genocide happened or it was asked. But yeah, just to give a little bit clarification for the people, this measurements, or not necessarily measurements, but reports are from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. And don't let that fool you. It is another UN organization, whose purpose is basically to map out the food security in different regions. And what they are doing right now is uh, reduce the threshold for specifically when it comes to children suffering from malnutrition to basically reclassify what is happening now in Gaza as starvation. They haven't done it ever before, but now they are, specifically because it wasn't reaching the number that they had to. But with this change, now it does. Yeah.
I want to bring up an abstract point, and that is that when you look at the history of philosophy, especially epistemology and the theory of knowledge, concepts are usually a starting point. Concepts just exist out there, and then it is a question of supposedly how we form proposition, how we use logic. And the interesting thing about Ayn Rand and the achievement she brought is she said, "Hey, hold on. There is a proper way of forming concept. There is a proper way of understanding universals, of turning the concrete things we encounter into abstractions that are actually true and align with reality." And she did a lot of work to demonstrate, for example, how extremism is a broken concept and how people use conceptual warfare against others. And I think now we live in such crazy times that people are explicitly are like above surface admitting in engaging in conceptual warfare against reality when it aligns with the will to annihilate Israel. So I think it's just like an indication of the crazy time we live in. There is an expression in Hebrew that goes. I don't know if it's in English as well, but it means like peeing from the dive board. You know, when people pee in the pool, so they know they're wrong, so they hide it. But what we see right now is just people peeing from the dive board completely out in the open. So this is just my point on this regard. This is a complete shame. Just viewers, bear in mind, like there is a conceptual warfare against you. People are trying to destroy the way you see reality, the way you think, the way you do generalizations, the way your mind works. They're trying to distort your thoughts so it will fit their narrative. Just put that in mind. Be careful. Think about what people are telling you, what they mean by the words they're using, because I guess definitions and connection to reality doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, and we've seen this sort of playing fast and loose with almost all definitions. I mean, even the idea of, I mean, we'll go to Francesca Albanese a little bit next, a little bit later. But one of the topics I wanted to cover on our other show, the Daily Objective, and we'll most likely cover tomorrow, is there is this story coming out of Toronto Film Festival that basically there was this documentary about October 7th that wasn't published, wasn't played because of copyright rights of Hamas. Because Hamas recordings of October 7th were used, and the film festival was worried about those copyrights. And this is the kind of idea of, yeah, I wanted to talk about. This is the idea of like how much concepts are used completely pulled out of what matters. Stuart, any thoughts?
Yeah, what strikes me is this is part of the broader problem of throughout politics these days. Emotion is primary, so the emotion is what matters, and then you use logic or reason or definitions or concepts in order to try to make something fit that what you've already decided via emotion. So emotionally, these people feel like Gazans must be starving. So we'll just change the definition until we make that a reality. And I think you see this across all kinds of issues. The emotion is primary. We live in incredibly emotionalist times, and that is terrifying to me.
I'd like to add on that. I
Yeah, go.
identify the emotion not as they feel like the Palestinians must be starving. This is not the essential emotion when you look at the motive. The emotion is hatred for the Western world, hatred for self, hatred for Jews, hatred for freedom. And that's why they try to give moral sanction to the purest evil as long as they are experiencing the result of such evil, which is suffering and being in a bad situation. And the people in Gaza are in a bad situation, and they carry the moral responsibility for them being in this bad situation. And this is what the woke left or the UN or the leading intellectuals of the world can understand, because they look at the world as a sort of a class struggle of whoever is in a bad situation. It's the fault of the people that actually did something with their life and build a proper good life, and they must have did it in like against like exploited those people in such poor situation. They cannot see reality in any other way because that's how they choose to design their thought process. And then they experience it as those strong emotions, so they keep on convincing themselves that this is actually reality. It's a completely, it's like self-made delusional mentality. It's a really bad way of living. It's really ruins the mind completely. And then the problem is, like, if they would have just ruined their own mind, like, I wouldn't care less. The thing is, they advocate for their delusions to the world, and the world listens. That's the problem.
Yeah, and again, sort of the way this organization works, again, the integrated food security phase classification, and the way people take it, right? So the numbers are mostly just taking, are abstracted. Again, this almost every number that we've seen in the past are basically sort of like either reports, guesses, estimations, but they're always taken as facts. I mean, we've covered this Lancet article, or not even article, like an opinion piece, basically, that had number like 200,000 Palestinians might be dead because or will die because of a certain basically understanding of the used, which was basically they just took the number they had, they multiplied it by I think like five or something like that, and that's how they got the number. Maybe somebody in the chat can tell me it was like 186,000 or something like that. And then later, this was just published. Lancet is a sort of a prestigious journal, and then it was used as a fact. People, I think a few weeks or a few months later, we watched an interview on Piers Morgan, and somebody just said it. The Lancet article said 186 Palestinians have died. And here is something we see something very similar here. According to the classification that is going right now in Gaza, about, I think, 400 Palestinians should be dying every single day from starvation, not from trauma deaths, not from the war itself, from starvation. Yet, even according to Hamas, we have how many deaths last time I checked? 19 apparently from starvation. So again, uh, you have this like weird thing of basically uh, there are simply reports, but nobody takes them as like reports or some information. They are taken as facts. And I mean, ER, what do you like? What can you do against this, where basically an organization can do something like this for information, but everybody takes it as facts. Everybody bases policy around that, but the organization itself doesn't clarify what it actually means, at least seemingly so.
Well, it's very hard. Like, it's a facade in such a large scale and high level. The thing you can do is just fight the moral sanctions such institutes gets in the first place. There is no justification for the UN to exist as such in the first place. This is like the UN is letting a bunch of dictators have a majority vote over the free world. So that's the result of that. You get a system that disguises itself as some sort of a objective unified authority, but it's basically a bunch of dictators and their bureaucrats and their henchmen promoting coercion around the world. And I think, like, me as an Israeli, if I would have like to give advice for the Israeli government, I would tell them, listen, don't bother. This is a lost battle, and it is a secondary battle. You should focus on the essential. And the essential in this case is the implicit moral message that even Israel, in some sort, unfortunately, accepts this implicit moral premise, and that is as if Israel is responsible to feeding its enemies. Israel is not responsible for the well-being of Gaza. We left Gaza in 2005. We said, go on, make a state, make a good place out of it. The Gazans, because they are following the ideology of Palestinism, told the world they are so poor and incompetent and uncapable, so they got foreign aid, and they used this foreign aid to build missiles and tunnels and plannings on how to murder and rape and kidnap Israelis, and that's what they did. And they've initiated this act of aggression, and they have to pay for it. And if they're having a bad time right now because they're losing the war, because Israel is not completely self-sacrificing itself, it's their problem. Like, I don't understand. Why is Israel responsible to feeding those who hold the ideology that it is a commitment to destroying Israel and suffering on the way? Like, this is the essence of the people in Gaza. And I've said it many times. There are many people opposing Hamas, but they're opposing Hamas because they want to kill all the Jews in different forms and tactics and strategies and manners and ideological basis. But they all agree that there is a wide consensus that their essence as Palestinians is the destruction of Israel and clearing the Middle East and the world of Jews. So I have no moral obligation to feed those people. And if they don't want to be hungry, which, by the way, they're quite obese over there, but that's a different story. If they don't want to be hungry, they should say, okay, we surrender this ideology of death and destruction and just release the hostages, surrender your weapons, and try to actually build a proper society. And yeah, we can guide you. We can show you how to do that. The Western world knows how to form a proper state, or at least, a mixed economy. Okay, but still, we can show you how to form a government that objectively governs the use of power, and not just says, okay, let's just use our power as government to destroy the world.
Yeah, and Something I also wanted to bring up is the idea that, again, like knowledge is contextual, right? And I took from their website this picture, which is the sort of the rates of the sort of like food security in different regions. Now, if a country is white, that doesn't mean nothing is happening there. They're simply not checking exactly what's happening. But basically, everywhere there is red, it's a similar situation to Gaza. And I feel like most people won't even be able to like find Gaza on this map, but I don't want to harp on this too much. But we have specifically for, again, people on the podcast, similar situation to Gaza are happening in Sudan, South Sudan, Burkina Faso, and I think also parts of Bangladesh. Yet, when I check pretty much anything, Gaza is the only thing we hear about. When I checked on X and I put in, I was looking for some pictures, so I just put in starvation. Every single thing was about Gaza. When I mean, check any news source right now. Every single thing is about Gaza. Now you could say Gaza is a special situation, but again, it's not. This organization has one more classification, basically something it's called like risk of famine. Basically, the situation is escalating. But Gaza is not the only one. There again are several places like South Sudan and south of normal Sudan that have similar situations. Yet the only focus is on Gaza. And when it comes to this idea of contextual knowledge, again, just because even if this is happening, this doesn't tell you anything about it, right? Like I know nothing about Sudan or South Sudan or Burkina Faso. I have absolutely zero idea. But when the only reason why I can point out that to talk about starvation or possible starvation in Gaza as a bad thing. The only reason why I can say that no, contextually, this is what happens during war is because I watch it so much. But and we as well as followers on our channel do. But Stuart, sort of like a question for you. The reason why I'm starting to doubt any international organization more and more is because that as soon as I find out anything more about any situation, I realize, oh my God, like this is not the right way to go about it. Similarly, when we talk about, for example, the ICC, right? Yeah, it's a good idea that there is an international arrest warrant for Putin. But when you start going about after Netanyahu, then I'm suspecting every single other person uh, you went after, right? Because okay, that might be actually problem with your definition if this is the kind of people you go after.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's ample reason to be very skeptical of virtually all the international organizations. And as you said, the fact that uh, if they really were just genuinely concerned about starving people in the world, then why aren't they equally concerned about these other regions? Why is their sole focus on Gaza? It certainly makes me question their motivation. I just don't see that there's any objectivity involved. Uh, and then as Yar said, it's just so incredibly frustrating that the assumption, even if you agree that there's starvation happening, the assumption that it's Israel's responsibility is just completely unwarranted. And I wish there were more voices, including Israel, pointing out that this is entirely the fault of the Palestinian leadership. It's Hamas. They could end the starvation. I mean, first of all, they're from what I've been able to see, there's ample, and there has been all along, ample resources coming into the region. Most of the problem is that Hamas is stealing the resources or preventing the resources from being distributed. So even granting the idea that Israel, should be doing this, which I don't grant, but the reality is that the roadblock is not Israel. It has not been Israel from the beginning. And I just don't understand why nobody, even though the facts are very clear, nobody seems to care about those facts.
Yeah, and not just Hamas prevents the distribution of the aid. The UN itself, the UN refuses to actually distribute the aid in the distribution centers until Israel stops with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So until Israel stops distributing aid from its aid sites, where it can ensure, or at the very least, it can ensure minimum of it goes directly to Hamas and can establish some form of standard. Well, as long as that standard is there, UN is saying, no, 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 we would rather let the Palestinians starve than let Israel distribute the aid. So again, it shows I mean, I don't particularly care for calling out hypocrisy, but it shows that the goal here is not actually preventing the starvation, it's to establish a certain kind of policy when it comes to Palestinians, most accurately described as Israel shouldn't have the control over its security. Hamas should persevere, or Palestinians with their goals of destroying Israel should persevere. We have a super chat from Apollo Zeus. Thank you so much. A super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And a super chat from Shona. Thank you. She says, there's literally starving in many other places. Iran is in water crisis. The fact that this one location is getting attention is ridiculous. Again, those things can technically be right. Like on this channel, we focus on Israel. There's many bad things happening in the world that we could focus on, and I could understand that you focus on certain things that you care for. But yeah, on the other hand, the fact is that the reason why there is a focus on Israel is again this as we talked about yesterday, sort of disproportionate, right? The goal here is like I think I'm trying to remember who exactly said it, but some sort of foundation, maybe it was the United Nations Human Rights Council, but they said that what was happening in Gaza they've never seen before, and this is simply ridiculous. There are actual places where tens of thousands of people are dying from starvation, like in Yemen, or maybe even I think in hundreds thousands. I can check. So like again, saying that this is like a unique situation is clearly politically motivated against Israel.
Yeah, I'd
I
like
want
to
to
add on
yeah
that.
yeah
So when people point out the supposed starvation in Gaza, the implicit motive is, in fact, they are saying, okay, we care, we want people to be well fed, we're humanitarian, we want everybody in the world to have welfare and proper way of living, and this is unbearable that people are starving, etc., etc. Now, if that was to be true, then they would have also been advocating to end starvation in other regions in the world, especially Central Africa. And it is evident that it is not happening, and it's good that Daniel pointed out the map. And what can we learn from that? We can learn from that the motive is in fact not the implicit motive they are demonstrating. It is a motive, not a positive motive of wish for welfare for the world, but a negative motive of hatred. Hatred for Israel, for the Jews, for the free world. And I said it in past show, I'll say it again. It stems from hatred for the concept of self. And I invite you to conduct an experiment to validate my theory. Those who call for who say like Israel is starving the Gazans and it's horrible and there's a humanitarian crisis there, I'm telling you, those people most likely hate themselves. And when you see a person bringing up those points, look for evidence for the fact that this person hates himself. And I think you'd be surprised to find out that in most cases, you'll actually see it. You'll see either they identify themselves as having mental health issues, or if you look at their tweets, you'll see that they're like set their life into complete crisis. It's and if there are like politicians or executives, you see that they serve like either dictatorships or evil entities or entities that essentially fight the Western world and fight freedom. It's always boils down to that, for this evil ideology that is based on the hatred for the self. So just conduct this research. I think you find very interesting results.
We have one more super chat from Shona. Thank you so much. She says, sorry, have to clarify. Focusing on Israel is fine, especially in a privately owned setting. I meant the UN only focusing on Gaza. I mean, yeah, absolutely. The fact that the UN is focusing on Gaza and Israel, again, this didn't even start on October 7th. This was a trend going on back decades. They have unique or special organizations like UNRWA for the Palestinian refugees. Again, for every single other refugee, there is the other organization. I cannot remember the name right now, but there is a organization for all refugees that is working with. Palestinians have their special thing again for some reason, which is to fight against Israel exclusively. So yeah, the fact is that I think the focus isn't bad if it made sense. If the UN was focusing much more on North Korea or China or Russia, then it would make sense. Those are the countries that abuse, well, not even, or Iran. Those are the countries that actually abuse the I'll use the human rights definition of UN. Those are the ones that actually abuse it. To focus almost at all on any Western nation. I mean, when you have countries, like I said, like North Korea, the fact that you would even once almost talk about Israel and assumed abuses of rights by Israel is already disproportionate. Not even talking about the fact that Israel is talked about more than all other nations combined. Stuart?
Um, well, I don't know if it's pushing back, but I would point out that there is something reasonable about it. There's no point in criticizing a country like North Korea. It's not, they don't care. They're so evil. Whereas bad things that are happening in free or semi-free countries, there is actually the opportunity to make improvements. So to some extent, it does make sense to focus on those areas where you can actually achieve some good. But that's not what's happening here with Israel. I mean, that's just not. Israel is certainly not above reproach. No country is. They've made a lot of mistakes. But to ignore the essential nature of them as a Western country, as a country that is founded, with some understanding of individual rights, is just a complete blank out. To look at the Palestinians. I mean, you certainly know much more about this than I do, but the whole concept of a Palestinian people is a very recent invention. And, I think their entire identity is tied in with, it's not like an identity that goes back to, ancient history, whatever. It's really all about fighting and defeating Israel. That is the nature of the identity of the Palestinian people as such, in my understanding. So to treat them as in some way equivalent to a country that was founded on principles of individual rights, it's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, and it's actually good to point that out, the fact that, you can have the special rapporteurs for Belarus, which I think there is one. And yeah, Lukashenko is not going to read the report. He doesn't care what the UN or anybody else says. It's only Western countries that actually do have, I think, in some way naive respect for the UN, and in some ways understandable, because those are the countries that actually do care for individual rights, that actually do care for some amount of accountability. It reminds me, one of the funniest story that happened with the Paris Climate Agreement, where pretty much it was like one of the biggest farces because nobody actually committed to anything serious. I think China was one of the countries that basically said, "Oh, we are actually going to pollute more than we were planning to do so, but we will commit to this sort of thing." And I think America was pretty much the only country that had at least some kind of basically they would actually do something for it, which again I think was faulty for them to do so, but it was like an actual genuine action. And that is the problem with including those dictatorships in any agreement, right? If it was, for example, even for all its force, the EU that is actually pushing towards Orban, for example, and the human rights or the rights abuses that he's doing, and is using some of the mechanisms like denying some of the funds to go there. That is some way of basically trying to push towards sort of more respect for rights. But this is nothing that is actually that is the UN doing. It's exclusively attacking the Western nations, and on a bad scale, right? If the UN was pushing against Israel for I don't even want to say any bad thing because it will be such an injustice to what's happening right now. But let's say there are actual individual rights abuses. Let's say Israel is confiscating property of some of their people. If UN was pushing against this, great. But what is UN pushing against? Against Israel actually fighting a war to defend the rights of their own people. I want to go to Francesca
Right, but
Albanese. Yeah.
before that, I want
Go.
to add on Stuart's point regarding the recent phenomenon of the Palestinian identity. And it will take me a few minutes, but I think it's very important. And to put that in the proper context, I want to start with defining racism, because it has a lot to do with that. Racism, so first of all, let's talk about race. Race is some sort of genetic, transferable qualities or faculties or whatever that basically has some sort of a real effect on a person. It can affect the skin of his color, his hair, eye colors, height, some sort of average, stuff like that. Now, all of those things are non-essential when you judge men. When you judge people, you judge people for their ideas, for their actions, etc. And that has nothing to do with race. Racism is when you create a link between race and one's ideology, rationality, volition, etc. As if races are like people in the same race hold some sort of ideas and they're interchangeable and etc. This is racism. And today we have a notion or an intellectual premise that presents itself as anti-racist, but is in fact racist by definition. And those are people who are unwilling to judge people that are in some sort of race because they're worried of being racist, of being portrayed as racist. So like there is a lot of people in America saying you cannot judge people if their race is black because of the history of the United States. And that's racism, because you take non-essential faculties as race and you put it in the world of moral judgment and normative evaluation. And it has nothing to do with that. A man is a man, and he has a free will, and he has the faculty of and the option to choose to be rational regardless of his race, and you should judge him based on that and on his ideas and actions. And why am I giving all of this introductory to the recent phenomenon of Palestinians? Because this phenomenon plays on this racist problem we have. So basically, Palestineism is an ideology. It is a political movement designed to destroy Israel. And this ideology works by creating a fake, or like creating a new, whatever you want to call it, ethnicity. But people who hold the ideology of Palestineism, their ethnicity is not Palestinian. There is no such ethnicity by definition. Their ethnicity is some sort of Middle Eastern or Arabic ethnicity. Egyptians, Libya, Jordanians, Lebanese, Syrians, some sort of tribes. This is their ethnicity, but creating this interchangeable ideological ethnic situation by treating Palestinians as ethnicity due to the racist premise of supposed anti-racism I presented, criticism against Palestinism is portrayed as racism. And I want to sum up everything I said with an example. Saying that condemning Palestinism as a movement and being called racist is like racist against Arabs, in effect, is the same as condemning the Nazi party and being accused of being racist against Germans. So this is the point I wanted to bring up.
Excellent point.
Yeah, and I mean, even the whole idea of sort of, I really dislike the idea of like ethnicity or even like trying to put different kind of groups into different kinds of ethnicities. Because again, it tries to put in together many things such as sort of like cultural ideas of a certain group with basically something like race, right? So those two things don't really go together. Even sort of like separating like Egyptians, Libyans, Syrians, Iraqis doesn't really make sense that because there are no sort of like even those groups like here you mentioned in the past it was and still are a bunch of tribes. The idea even that these are sort of like actual states is still, I think, sort of a foreign idea in the region. The idea of nation state had to be created. It is sort of like a modern invention, and to try to apply it everywhere just because we sort of reached that scenario already is, I think, already sort of faulty. We have a super chat from Bull Moose. Thank you so much. He says, quote, Palestinian is an ideology, not an identity. I mean, absolutely. This again, find me like one person who would describe themselves as Palestinian and is like pro-Israeli. There is none. Everybody understands that it's a political sort of description, right? If you go to Israel proper, Arabs there and Arabs in Gaza should be the same kind of people. Yet the people who would call themselves Palestinian, what they are actually trying to say is they are a certain ideology which is calling for the destruction of Israel and establishing some form of Palestinian state that would either include complete destruction of Israel or would definitely the goal be to destroy Israel. We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. A super chat from Shauna. Thank you so much. She says, I think what's dangerous is that Arabs living in the West have started to self-identify as Palestinians, even if they are not from the Levant. I mean that's exactly what I just said. We also have a super chat from Bulmus. Thank you so much. He says, ER, you absolutely nailed it. Thank you so much. And a super chat from Dan. Thank you so much. He says, um, are Muslim nations not accused of apartheid and sanctions by the West? UN, like South Africa, was for persecuting their minorities, forcible conversions. I mean, it's sort of hard thing to classify most Arab states as apartheid, although even technically they would be, is because any minority that was there either got out. So all the again Jewish population and Jewish people were across all of Middle East, and all of them were either kicked out or fled before something would happen to them. So it's sort of like apartheid requires you to have like a certain other group that you can have different rights for, which usually is not the case for most of the Arab states. And we have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, phrase of the week, there is no Palestine. It's fake. I mean, yeah, that should be taken. I really want to go to Francesca, but we are still
But
talking.
before that,
Yeah.
one more thing. I'd like to add I think also regarding what Stuart said. And Stuart basically says there is not much value in condemning North Korea. And I'd like to say I see it in a completely different way. And the value of condemning evil is not only for the sake of, in this case, the people of North Korea. This is also a very selfish thing to do for yourself as an individual, and also speaking about the Western world. There is great value in identifying evil, defining evil, recognizing evil, understanding evil, and condemning evil. And by doing that, you expose it, you explain why it is wrong, you condemn it, you don't give it a moral sanction, and the lack of condemnation for North Korea, it's the sheer thing that allowed this regime to survive. It cannot survive by itself. It survives as well as many other evil regimes by aid, donations, Western support. And these are fueled by the moral approval people give to the regime in North Korea based on excuses and reasons built upon evil ideologies of humanitarianism that disconnects men from justice. And so, like, we should call for people to take responsibility over their lives, and we should call for nations to put the use of force under objective control and not to abuse force to take away people's freedoms and rights. So this is a very important thing. And yes, of course, like if I'll go and condemn North Korea, it wouldn't change anything. But if there will be an intellectual change in the world and people will demand different things from their government, and government will demand different things from the UN, or altogether just withdraw from the UN and start something else, or like just form proper relationships between free states, a world would be a much better place. There would be less death, destruction, famine. There would be less evil, because all of those evil dictatorships would collapse, and it would be possible to install a proper regime instead of them.
I just want to jump in and say I agree entirely, and I was not. If I gave the impression that I personally thought that there was no point in criticizing North Korea or bad regimes, that could not be further from the truth. I agree completely about the importance. I was saying that for the people, in sort of the UN, the pragmatists, from their standpoint, it's like they're not going to focus on that because that they don't think it's going to get the result. They're focusing where they think they can actually do some good. It's a pragmatic approach. It's not the objectivist approach, and it's not my approach. But I do think that that's part of what's operating in the UN
100%
organizations.
Yeah, I agree.
And we have a super chat from Dan. Thank you so much. He says, Islamic nations are apartheid. Non-Muslim men cannot marry Muslim women, but Muslim men can. Constitution of Islamic nations. Well, it's funny to talk about constitutions of those nations, but constitutions of Islamic nations have banned non-Muslims from being in positions of authority over Muslims. So I don't know about internal politics of every single Muslim majority nation, but again, it's that sort of thing that you wouldn't even see happen, right? You wouldn't really see like a Jewish person or a Christian man or any sort of other ethnicity in like Saudi Arabia try to, well, they wouldn't, in Saudi Arabia, they wouldn't even try to go run for a position of power, because you cannot run for a position of power. But yeah, you wouldn't even really get to that situation, because again, they simply do not even have the population to sort of like establish apartheid, because again, those are not the kind of nations you want to travel to. Those are not the kind of nations you want to immigrate to. So yeah, it's sort of I think definitionally they not necessarily sure if apartheid is the what you would call it, but would definitely discriminate against other races or non. I mean, the whole idea of even Islamic rule, like the idea of I think it's called jizya, right? That you have this like special tax for non-Muslim people. And we have one more super chat from Dan. Thank you so much. He says, all pro-Palestinians are okay with Pakistan being created in the name of Islam, but Israel is wrong. They all believe in the glory of Islam. I mean, it's kind of, I want to at some point look into Pakistan and India because that's another sort of like the two-state solution that came out, or I guess a three-state solution technically, that came out of the UN. But I don't know that much about it now. And we have a super chat from Bull Moose. Thank you so much. He says, "You guys have a common opinion that what amount to self-preservation you consider selfishness, and I wanted to know why because I don't agree mostly." Oh, I think he's asking. You guys have a common opinion that what amount of self-preservation you consider selfishness. Uh, I think like why we consider self-preservation selfishness. Yeah, you seem
Yeah,
like you want to.
I'd like to touch on that. So basically, according to Objectivism, the thing about selfishness stems from man's nature. What is man's nature? Man is a rational animal, and the need for selfishness stems from both aspects of man. As an animal, as a living creature, every living creature in the universe is basically self-preserving itself. That's the essence of life. Life is a process of keeping you as a living entity exist. That's being selfish. And that's also true for man's rational faculty. Man's rational faculty basically enables him to be rationally selfish in order to live. Now, when I say that, so there's a lot of implications and a lot of misconceptions that if selfish men are ones who go over and are just brutes or con artists or whatever. And that's not true, because when I talk about self-sustaining process, man has physical needs and psychological needs. Man not only has to be fed, he also has to be proud of himself. He also to be happy. Your mental health is crucial for your survival. And this is, I think people ignore. It is in my interest as men, universally, to be honest, to be fair, to be productive, to be independent, to have a proper normative judgment and give people what they deserve. That's justice. It is in my interest not to be a brute and not to be a con artist and not to be whatever. It is in my selfish interest to be a good man. And by the way, that's does not contradict with having a good life, happy life, with the practical. And when you apply this to political level, so what is a government? It is an agent that the people has delegated the right to self-defense to this agent, because the use of force has to be managed objectively. You cannot just have a society when people willy-nilly decide when to use force. I cannot come to Daniel and say, hey, I think you stole my purse and I'm going to use the force to get my money back. I have to call the agent, the objective authority, and it will decide in such situation. So this is what I see from your question. I hope I got it right. But like, yeah, self-preservation is selfish. Being selfish is good. And it is in your interest to be a good moral person that lives a proper life. And this is how you can achieve self-esteem, to know your worth, to know you earned what you have, to know you're a good person that is have earned his wealth and happiness. And society should be run on the same terms. Now, when there is a ruler, a regime that takes away its people's freedoms and use force not to prevent coercion, but to steal and rob his people and then its neighbors, this is an evil that ought to be condemned. And this is against a nation's self-preservation to give moral sanction to such evil, because eventually this will affect the good nation, either by war or by just like conflicts or by attacks against it. And a prime example is Israel. Israel is a free society, and it has been attacked by the evil that Israel gave moral sanction to that evil to exist, and even took the blame for their suffering. So now we lost thousands of innocent men because of that. That's against our interests. That's an understatement.
And for more, I would recommend people check out The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Especially, I think you might be, I'm not sure, is the first chapter maybe online by ARI on the website? So maybe people can just look up Virtue of Selfishness on Google and they might be able to read at least the first chapter, which I think goes through the most basic things. Stuart, any comments on this from you?
No, I think AR covered it quite well.
Okay, let's actually get to Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur for the, I cannot even remember the full title, Occupied Palestinian Territories or something like that. Um, and she recently, I'm trying to look up a specific quote. She basically talked about how, yes, starvation yes, we need to recognize the Palestinian state, but it shouldn't take us away from the fact that there is a genocide going on. She said, of course, it's important to recognize the state of Palestine, but yeah, it's incoherent that they've not done it already, talking about the fact that it wasn't recognized yet. She also called for embargo on all arms sales to Israel and cessation of all trade agreements. Yeah, any thoughts on this?
No comment.
All right, Stuart.
Um, I mean, you're seeing a huge push now, not just from her, but Canada, everyone, for a Palestinian state. I think this fundamentally comes from a failure to understand what makes a state legitimate. What does self-determination mean? And when you understand the whole nature of Palestinianism, that the whole founding concept of it is not to preserve individual rights, which is what a proper government should be founded on, but it is simply to eliminate Israel. That is not a legitimate basis to form a state. So, I don't know how you expect that. And I think some of the people do. They have this magical thinking that somehow, if you just give these people a state, then they will be happy. It's like, no, that's that's not. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. That you could get peace in the region when the whole purpose of Palestinianism is warlike. How do you get peace out of that? It makes no sense.
I'd like to add on that.
Sure.
Yeah. I said it in previous shows, but I'll say it again because why not? The premise of self-determination of nations as a primary moral right is extremely racist, in essence. And I'll give you an example. Under such a moral premise, the Western world doesn't care that Egyptians are being persecuted in Egypt, and Iranians are being persecuted in Iran, and Jordanians being persecuted in Jordan, and Syrians are being persecuted in Syria, etc., etc. Soviets being persecuted in the Soviet Union, whatever, or whatever race. And they don't have a problem with that is because the evil and the victim, the dictator and its subjects, share the same race. So that's okay. That's just a proper manifestation of the race. The race want to be oppressed. That's great because they're in the same race. People in the same race are apparently interchangeable and have the same will. So it's completely fine when they coerce each other. That's the premise. And on the other hand, if, God forbid, Israel rule Arabs and gives them rights and make sure they have property and they're not being coerced or have like violence against them, that's wrong because the ruler is of different race and people has the right to self-determine themselves as assholes. Well, that's false. Just like a thief can go and rob a bank does not give him the right to do so. And just like nations of the same race can form a dictatorship, does not give him the right and the moral sanction to do so. But that's not the worldview of today. You can do whatever the hell you want to other people as long you are the ruler and they're in the same race of you. And that's just wonderful. I think this is just like drives me nuts. Like this notion is so dumb, and people follow it with such passion and fight to promote this evil idea. It's baffled me completely. It's completely absurd, and I think people that you know scream that premise without having a minute to actually think about it should just be ashamed of themselves.
And just to bring up one more quote from the Francesca, she said, "The UN needs to decide whether to be real, multilateral platform. We are no longer in the settler colonial bloc kind of mentality that conceived the birth of the UN. Now there are 193 member states, and all of them have agency, and all of them must be respected. Now is the time to cut the umbilical cord from the veto power mentality and put the emphasis on the General Assembly." So we are running out of time, so I'll go to last comments. But again, this idea, she's basically calling for more power to dictatorships. She has a problem, and again, she doesn't have a problem with the fact that I was about to say Soviet Union, with the fact that Russia or communist China have the veto power. What she has a problem with is that the US has the veto power and has used it, thankfully, to actually push against the attacks coming out of the UN from the Security Council against Israel. Because again, whenever again, this idea that everything in the UN should now go by majority, which again, most countries in the world right now are dictatorships. I have no idea why would you want to have them have more power. I mean, almost majority of the countries at the Security Council are dictatorships. So even that's not really a good solution. But Stuart, any comments on this or anything we've talked about, and where can people find you?
Uh, yeah, I mean, the UN has long been a joke of an organization. I mean, Ayn Rand wrote about this over 50 years ago, and it's probably substantially worse now than it was then. So, but unfortunately, they still have power and prestige, and so we have to fight against them where we can. You can reach me. I've got a Substack, stuartmargolis.substack.com, and I'm also on Facebook quite a bit, so you can find me there.
Iyar, any last thoughts from you, and where can people find you?
I'm Iyar Reichel. I'm an associate of the Ayn Rand Center, Israel. You can find out more about us at aynrand.org.il/about. I'm also a leading member of the Victory Now movement. We're working on a book, both in English and in Hebrew. This book presents a plan for Israel's victory and the moral basis for such plan. As you might have heard, I think this is the primary, the source of how to make a true, proper change in the Western world. This is the moral, intellectual work, and this is what I'm doing with this book and movement. Please visit www.victory.now. You can sign up for the waiting list for the book. You can see our Substack, and you can support us. Thank you.
And this might be over today for ARCUK content, but we help produce the cutting edge. So we have a show in half an hour. So make sure the link to that is in the chat. So make sure to check that out. Other than that, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective and the reality show. Until then, bye bye.